Good morning, and welcome to the Woodland Fitness Podcast. So, today will be the first episode that I have recorded after my debacle of posting the first episode. For those of you that followed along and saw me stress out about it a little bit on Instagram, basically, when I tried to post the podcast to Spotify, I scheduled it to release Sunday morning at 10 a.m., which is when you will be receiving this podcast. And every podcast going forward, I will have a podcast out, an episode out on Sunday at 10 a.m. So you can count on that from now on. I set it to release, but I didn't claim the podcast name in Spotify, and so it didn't actually release to Spotify. And in short, I wound up having to change the name of the podcast and go back to my original brand name, Woodland Fitness, which I do love dearly. However, it does kind of take away from some of the fun adventure that I was going to add in about posting on Sundays from the Iron Chapel, but that's okay. So moving forward, this is a fitness and health podcast, and we will be covering many different topics, including different types of exercises that we could be doing and nutrition. Today, we are going to be discussing nutrition, just a little bit, a lot. What I want to talk about is what is most commonly referred to as calories in, calories out. However, it is properly known as the energy balance model. Calories in, calories out kind of oversimplifies what the energy balance model actually is. Moving forward for the next few episodes, we're going to talk about more nutrition topics. However, I'm setting the ground by kind of basically explaining what the energy balance model is and what it isn't. Everyone is, by now most people are pretty familiar with the idea of counting calories, whether it's from Weight Watchers or some other program, whether it's from using MyFitnessPal or any of the other fit tracking apps, if it's from just looking at the back of a box of cereal and seeing the calories on the back. Everybody has an idea of what it is to track calories. However, usually there's a little bit more to it. So, energy balance, what we're looking at is an equation. On the one side, we have, to go with the simple terminology, calories in, which is usually made up of the food that we eat throughout the day, of the liquids that we put in our body, of the dressings that we put on top of our foods, everything that we could be putting into our bodies should be straightforward. However, it really isn't that straightforward because the way that we measure calories is by, the way that calories are measured usually on processed packaging is based on how many grams of protein, fat, and carbohydrates are. We have an idea of how many calories are in each of those things. They take that, multiply those together, and give you that as an idea of the calories. However, that really is not an accurate measurement of how much energy your body is actually getting from that food. We have a really hard time accurately measuring that, especially when you put it in combination with other foods. So that side of the formula is actually fairly gray. We usually look at it as, my soda has 240 calories in it, so I need to add that, and that's exactly how many calories I put in my body from that drink. It might be, it might not be. We're not going to focus too much on that today. We are going to get back to that in a future episode. On the other side, which is what I consider the more important side of the equation, is the calories out part. Most people tend to think of that in forms of exercising food off. How many times have you said, oh, I ate this cookie, so I need to do 10 push-ups to burn this cookie off? I think I've met enough people with that mentality to know that everybody's heard that at least once. That's usually how it's looked at. However, that's not really the way that our bodies work. The calories outside of the energy balance model is made up of several different parts. One of those things is called the basal metabolic rate. Hopefully most of you are familiar with metabolism. In essence, it is the processes that are going on inside of our body to maintain our body the way that it is. Our body likes to stay in a certain state, and it will use whatever energy it has to maintain that state. Wow, blanked on where I was going. Right, basal metabolic rate. So basal metabolic rate is the rate, is the amount of calories that our body uses to exist. Not at rest, but to exist. Because there are functions going on in your brain and your organs. There are cells dividing, there are cells doing all kinds of things, bringing things into them, passing things out of the cell wall. All of these things require energy of some sort. And that energy is usually referred to as calories out. And all of those processes for you to exist is referred to as basal metabolic rate. So this is what we consider the baseline of calories out. Most equations that give you an idea of how many calories you might be burning start with that. Because for most people, it's in the range of 1,200 to 1,800 calories. And that is, I emphasize, a range. You could be anywhere in there. You could be outside of that. On top of basal metabolic rate, we have what we call NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. What that is a fancy word for saying that it's things like this, where I'm moving my hand around, where I'm twitching my foot. Those are things that are considered non-exercise activity. Those are things that we more or less don't have control over. Yeah, there are times that you can actively start moving your leg around, kind of twitch and fiddle. However, for the most part, we do those things subconsciously. That is part of the formula that doesn't have a huge effect on total calories out. However, it can make a big difference if that fidgeting is compared to someone who's eating well over what their body needs for energy versus someone who's eating well under. Someone who's eating well over will be more likely to fidget more. Whereas someone who's eating well under what their body needs, you're actually going to notice that you fidget less, that you move around less. And I say you're going to notice, but honestly, you might not notice. It is subconscious, and your body kind of just does it to help regulate your metabolism. Like I said, our body likes to maintain a state of homeostasis. Our body does not like change. It tries to keep things stable as best that it can, and NEAT is one of the ways that it does that. In addition to that, we have what we call the thermogenic effect of food, or feeding. Either way you look at that, they're both similar. What that is the amount of energy that your body has to use to break down the food that you're taking in. In general, we have an idea of how much energy that our body needs to use to break down proteins, carbs, and fats, and it's nominal at best. It really doesn't make a huge difference in that whole energy balance model. Now, the part that most people get caught up on the most, we're going to just say most a lot. I am practicing podcasting, so a lot of this is going to be me learning how to better communicate, and one of those things is me realizing that I say some things way too often. Anyway, so exercise activity is the thing that most people get caught up on. we often look at exercise activity as a way to burn off calories, when in all reality, for the most part, you're not burning nearly as many calories as you think you are with that exercise. We'll get more into that in a future episode, especially when it comes to different types of exercise, like weightlifting and cardio. Those have two different effects, and we'll talk more about that in the future. So, that is kind of a breakdown of each side of this model. Calories in, calories out. Now, I gave you an idea of why counting calories might be more difficult than you thought to begin with. And now I want to talk a little bit about why counting calories might be leading you in the wrong direction, period. Most people, when they go to figure out how many calories they need to be burning, they either have a set number that they think they need to drop down to, or they use a calorie calculator online, which, after going over the complexities of the formula on each side, might give you an idea of how accurate those formulas are going to be. And both of those approaches are going to put you in a wrong starting place. The way that I actually like to start, and I'll go into more depth when we talk more about approaches that you should take for different goals. I think I'll do a separate episode for cutting versus bulking. Those are two very different goals and two very different approaches. But the way that I like to look at calorie counting is to get an idea of how much food you're eating currently. To get an idea of not just how much, but what kinds of food you're eating. I actually think that it's a better behavior modification because it helps you become more aware of what you're actually eating. Now, there are benefits to actually keeping track of your calories. I don't think it's a good long-term goal. I think it's a good starting place, and it will give you something that you can learn about yourself and something that you can learn about the food that you're eating. So, to recap, the energy balance model as a whole is a little bit more than just calories in, calories out. That is an effective way of describing it. However, I think people think it doesn't work as a model for helping you lose weight or gain weight because they don't fully understand the entire formula that adds up. Most people think that if they work out more, that means that they are balancing out the other side of the equation. They are burning more calories than they ate. Or, on the other hand, they might think that if they eat 1,200, 800 calories, there are situations where we might go to that level. However, most people are not in that situation. Again, we'll go into that more in a future episode. Most people think that if they drop down to those low levels of calories, that they will just start losing weight. However, because there are two sides to this equation and our body does not like change, that's not always the case. It's an equation, and our body likes balance. Our body will find ways to balance out that equation as best as it can. And there are approaches that we can take to not hijack necessarily, because we do want to work with our bodies. And if we don't, you will see negative side effects. But we want to put ourselves in a situation where the formula isn't so offset that our body will immediately try and regulate it. Now, that was my best attempt at explaining the energy balance model. If you have any questions, please leave it in the message in the comments below, either on YouTube, or you can find me on Instagram at Woodland Fitness. You can shoot me a message, and if there are specific questions that you have, feel free to send them to me. I'd love to address them more in these podcasts and get a better idea of how I can best help you, my listeners. This week, for the challenge this week, I want you to go, let's say, at least 3 days of tracking what you eat. get an idea of how many calories you're taking in, and just record it. Just don't judge yourself about what you're eating. Don't skip things either, because there are going to be things that you're not going to think about. There are going to be snacks that you're going to eat that you will forget to track. Try and remember those things, write them down, and get an idea of what you're eating from day to day. And we will get back to how we can use that energy balance model as a tool for both weight loss and for putting on weight and size, putting on muscle mass, and for health and vitality in the future, how we can set ourselves up. All right. Y'all have a great day, and I will catch you next week. Bye.